Welcome to the Inside Digital Transformation Podcast. Inside Digital Transformation explores how organizations of every size and shape are using technology today to survive and thrive in the face of relentless change. If you are a business or technology leader charged with making the most of digital transformation in your organization, then this podcast is for you. And now here's your host, Alan Bernard, a technology journalist, editor, and copywriter who has been covering the intersection of business and technology for over 2 decades.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm speaking with Guarav, Sharma and Laila Kakar from the MTN Group, a $12 billion African telco with over 280 million customers, about how they are using machine learning and AI to change procurement from a cost center to a value generator and source of deep market insights for the entire organization and its vendors. So Guarav, Laila, thank you for being here.
Pleasure is mine, Alan. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So why don't you give me a bit of a background on MTN, and then we'll dive into how you use digital technologies or how you're applying digital technologies to basically redo your procurement operation from the top down, it sounds like.
MTN is the largest Pan-African telecommunication provider. We have handled about 12 billion in annual spend, and then we are organized quite in a very lean structure where the group category and the group procurement function is based out of Dubai. We have about 287 million subscribers today, and we work with a very complex set of vendors across the globe. Telco procurement is largely capex intensive, and the macroeconomic environment challenges make it further challenging for us to operate in. And as part of our digital journey, we have undertaken quite a number of initiatives starting 2017 with joining of our Chief Procurement Officer, Dirk Kahl, and we installed some of the cutting-edge technologies for which you have seen some of the results. We do have teams of dedicated categories to managers. We have a center of excellence based out of Dubai, and then we work across multiple ERP systems, try to make sense of the data. And this is basically what drives our procurement initiatives.
Okay. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of what you did, I guess the question I have is, why did you do it? What was the state of procurement before, I think you said Dirk Kahl came on board in 2017, and he's your Chief Procurement Officer?
Yes, correct.
So can you kind of give me some background on what drove the need for transforming how you buy goods and services?
So Dirk has been in the industry for more than 25 years, and he has seen the phases of the telecommunication procurement specifically. If you see telecommunication procurement ecosystem is largely different from, let's say, a manufacturing setup or a banking procurement setup, because you have waves of innovation in very short amount of cycles, starting from 2G, then you move to 3G, then you move to 4G, 5G, and 6G. Mm-hmm. And we are required to rapidly innovate and deploy these solutions. So, the procurement is a vital enabler of the speed at which you can roll out the business products to the consumer. And that's why we wanted an agile mindset to meet the needs of 5Gs and 6Gs and future technology deployments. And when you look at procurement, you can run procurement from a very rigid mindset of, okay, I buy the tool and I will digitize the operation from the tooling perspective. But that's a very limited way of looking at things. How Dirk develops his procurement is, I think he has about 10 focus areas, starting from digital tooling to data-driven decision-making. And this is what Laila is leading in terms of AI and machine learning, using the data points that we are generating and embedding those data points as part of your day-to-day decisions making. So those are not sitting in silos somewhere where people occasionally log on and then use the intel for visualization. So I think when Dirk moved in, he focused the whole structure around those 12 pillars, which is data-driven decision-making, category expertise, sustainability, ESG, and so on and so forth, pretty much more. And then he started putting the organization in the direction of, I want everything to be backed by data instead of just gut feel and opinion space. So everything was driven using data. And with Laila building the tools of Jessica, we are now analyzing, I'm not sure whether you're familiar with linear programming and multi-combination scenarios. So we are able to now analyze all possible computation in which a decision can be awarded. What's the best mathematical way? We have built models in terms of anticipating what a shipping crisis would look like. We simulate that, we select the best mitigation action, and all these things are happening on top of the databases that we have built. So while if you see the other organizations can be, let's say, stuck at, I buy the tool and that's pretty much about it.
And by tool, you mean a procurement package, software package, or supply chain management package, or ERP or something, right?
Correct. So just to break it down, I mean, there are phases of digitization expertise. People start from ERPs, then they roll over to the e-sourcing, supplier management, contract management module. Some would bring in the spend analysis domain, master data management domain, but that's pretty much about it. But then what do you do with all these data points, right? And this is where our center of excellence setup comes into play, where Laila is leading the data science domain, and we are working with category managers to roll out our specific use cases, such as how do we anticipate a shipping crisis in supply chain. So we have a nerve center where we are harmonizing all these data points. We have our price curve, we have our scenario analysis where we use game theory to model the strategic outcomes in the negotiation. So in summary, I guess most of the organization would start with getting the tools in place, go into the implementation mode, and that's pretty much it. But what Dirk has pushed MTN into is into a phase where we are now using predictive models using those data points. So it's not only static visualizations on a Power BI, we are actually sending out recommendation by sensing what is going in the market. So if you see the span of MTN, we are across 19 markets in Africa, and we have 19 local procurement teams. So we need to get hold of what they are buying, what kind of demands they have for the upcoming next year, next to next year. So to harmonize and build an early recommendation system or a warning system is where you unlock the next phase of your digitization. And that's exactly what I guess MTN is doing at the moment. We have moved beyond the buy the tool, implement and forget. You're actually making use of the data. And that's what is, I guess, the guiding principle for us.
So what do you know what the state of procurement was prior to 2017? How was it done?
So before, I guess, like many organizations, we were being seen as a cost center. And procurement has always been a cost center. We were largely focused on generating cost savings for the group, supporting the shipping, and that's pretty much about it.
Okay. And so that kind of takes us to where we are to 2017, right? And so what shifted in that you wanted to move away from just, finding the best deals, basically, right, to actually getting out in front of things like supply chain issues?
The driver behind this whole thing was we wanted to transform the procurement from a cost center to a value creation center. And that was the theme that was established. Now, to break it down, as I said, Dirk identified about 12 areas. We have to become more agile to force faster speed to market the products. Second, we had to ensure our supply chain was resilient enough. So for any shocks, and you later saw that how 2020, 2021 went.
Right.
We were pretty early in understanding that the sustainability and the local supply development will become quite a good focus in latter half of the 2022. So we took early head step of building something in there as part of the local supplier enablement is concerned. And the huge portion was, when I said Dirk established in 2017, I guess a dedicated data science team, which Laila is leading at the moment, which was all about tool is just the phase one. What do we want to do with this data? So build the use case library, make sure people are using the data as part of the normal process. And this is where the huge focus went in ensuring that none of the strategic tenders that we are doing today, or even the inventory management that we are doing today, is coming on a gut feel basis. We should have total visibility, not only on the static side, but let's say 6 months down the line. How will your shipments would look like, what kind of inventory levels would deplete, what kind of decisions would be taken.
And so let's move on to the technology that supports all of this, Laila. Can you kind of give me an overview of particularly AI today is of interest, right, for obvious reasons, chat GPT, right? But kind of give me a high level view of the important points of the data infrastructure, I mean, I'm assuming you're using cloud and things like that to run this stuff, right? I think that's of less interest than the actual modeling, for example, that you're doing, and the data that you're using. And then what are the outputs of those efforts, right? And then how are they translated into, decision making?
Sure. Maybe to jump first on the previous question that you asked with regards to how do we actually create value? I think analytics is also a very important factor when you want to create value. So what we try to do is we try to move away from being more reactive, meaning that whatever is happening in the market, it already happens, and then we react to it in the best way possible, to be more proactive, meaning that before it even happens, that we would have a strategy. And I think to move even further, that we would figure out, based upon whatever is going to happen, what action we need to take to get to the point that would benefit us the most. And I think that's how we would create value, because it's no longer us waiting until the market tells us what is going to happen and then us trying to figure out what the best possible decision would be, but us really being proactive and figuring out, okay, this is highly likely that this would happen, and what would be the best steps for us to take already now in order to get to the best point in the future when it actually happens. For example, you would know that certain products that you are purchasing, you're being driven by other prices that are in the market, right?
Okay.
You could already forecast based upon what you're seeing that, okay, these commodities, how do I think these will change in the next 6 months, 1 year? For example, if you would already know that the prices would go down, you will try to, together with your demand team, figure out, okay, can we push this a little bit further in the, let's say, in the future to then start the purchasing process? Or if you see or you expect that the prices would increase, let's already purchase those products now, because we expect that the prices would increase and it would impact the product prices too. So that's more of a proactive approach, instead of you waiting and then the market telling you what is going to happen and you have no other choice than to go with it. And of course, this is not, the data will not tell you the whole story, right? You need to sit down with your demand team and try to figure out also from a business perspective, what are the possible scenarios that we could do? If we want to delay it, how much could we delay? If we want to start the process already now, what are we talking about? So it's more of a co-creative process that you would sit down with multiple teams and then figure out what the best thing is. So it's not only it's data driven, but data doesn't always tell you the whole story, right? You would need to sit down with a more cross-functional team to then look at the data and figure out what the best decision would be.
Okay. So what are the technologies that you're using to make that happen?
So it depends on the use case also. What we mostly use is when we really want to, I think the important thing to also mention is that most of our solutions are custom made and in-house. So it's tweaked to our specific desires and demands that we would have. In order to do that, we, for example, use open software to really create a solution that is fitted to the T, and we can really use it in the way that would benefit us the most.
Okay. Can you kind of get into more specifics on the actual tech?
Sure. So, for example, one of the applications that we have created is by using R Shiny. It has different modules. One of the modules is scenario optimization, meaning that if we have a new tender that encompasses, let's say, 16 different opcos, within each opco we have different regions, and we have certain criteria with every region. For example, if we want to modernize the technology that we have, then this application would help you to figure out what the best scenario would be of awarding it. Another example would be that we would do, and I think Guarav has mentioned this a couple of times, that we would use predictive analytics to figure out or to statistically determine what a fair price would be. So you have your gut feeling, you would know from experience that, okay, this is a good price, but can you also, based on historical data and how you would think that the market is going to change, figure out what a fair price would be at the moment. And this would help our category managers when they are doing the negotiations to know what the fair price is and whether they can, during the negotiation, actually have a price that they could be happy with.
in doing, excuse me, research for the call, it's my understanding you're also using game theory.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So it is a part of also the scenario optimization. So in order for you to get to the point, let's maybe start in general what game theory is. Game theory gives you, right, or helps you out in a statistical way or a mathematical way to figure out what steps you need to do to get to the point that is optimal for you. And of course, this is not dependent on you. It's dependent also on the decision that the others would make. In this case, our suppliers. So it's kind of a form of chess that you would figure out, okay, if this is my move, then I would expect that my supplier will do move B, and that would bring us to a mutual point of C. That's a simple way of saying it. So this scenario analysis would also help you figure out that what are all these scenarios that we are talking about? What are the decisions that your suppliers would potentially take? What can I do, or what decisions or steps can I take in order to get to the point that I actually want them to get to?
And so you're feeding this into models that are AI powered? What would be the right way to put that? What's the AI engine that you're using for your modeling?
I would say we're using machine learning, because when we are using this, there's a huge part of the algorithm that's learning from whatever we are feeding it, right? So let's say if this time we go into a negotiation and we came to an optimal choice, we feed this back to the model. So for the next time, it would learn from it and then determine what the best strategy would be. So there's definitely a huge part of machine learning in it. Just to maybe make it more simplified without using these buzzwords, as you can imagine, it's the same way when you're playing chess. You have millions or sometimes even billions of scenarios how you could award all of your vendors when you're talking about 16 different regions or 16 different opcos with all different regions, right? If I would just ask you, let's brainstorm and figure out what the best scenario would be, we could not do that. I couldn't even put it down on a piece of paper, right? So we would need to use some sort of artificial intelligence that would help us out to narrow down all of these scenarios to a chunk that for us would be able, we could discuss or look at, right? And then say, okay, what are the consequences? But if it's more than 100, it would already be impossible for us to have a proper conversation and a strategy. So to reduce it from millions to, let's say, your top 10 or top 5, you would need some form of artificial intelligence to come to that point.
And how many iterations do you run of these models to get to that top 5?
That's a great question. So because our applications are built in-house, it means that how we customize it for each and specific negotiation that we are in. So let's say each negotiation has different restrictions that we need to take into account. And it's also very agile. Because of our agile approach, each time when we go through a negotiation round, we might have new intelligence, or we figure out new things that we want to keep in mind. So we feed that back to the model, rerun it, come up with the top 5 again, and then figure out, okay, does it work for us, our strategy in this negotiation, but also company-wide? Is there something that we are missing that we also need to use as an objective to maximize? The challenging part is sitting down with the business and really making sure that you capture every intelligence that's there in your model. You don't want to miss out on very important decision factors, and you want to make sure that your machine actually understands what it needs to optimize and learns from it. And I think that's the complex part of it.
So where are you pulling data from to feed the models?
It could be from different sources, and it also depends on whatever negotiation you are doing. Most of the time, the important thing is historical data, because you also want to learn what has happened in the past. But in order to be proactive, there's some sort of a predictive way that you need to keep into account too.
Right.
So I think I already gave an example previously that I said, okay, you can look at commodity prices and how they would change over time, and they would influence the price of your product too. So what is that relationship? Some commodities would have a very big impact on your product prices, others less. But that's all easy if you have a statistical model. But the difficult part is to try to figure out what are all those factors.
So when you say commodity price, you're talking about copper
Could, for example, be. Yes, depends on your products.
Right?
Yes.
Which are integral to, right, integrated circuits, right?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So you're going pretty far afield. So you're taking predictions about commodities and other factors in the future and combining that with historical data about what things cost in the past, and then wrapping that with business logic, right?
Yes.
Using game theory to play these scenarios out, right? To game these scenarios.
Yes.
And then what about the human factor? How do you factor that into these models? Because humans are not linear in any regard, and they do things that just are utterly dumbfounding, right? I mean, so how does that work into these models? Because it has to be there as a wild card.
Yes.
Right?
So one of the things that we are also focusing on is the behavioral analytics part. Because when you're doing negotiations, it's all great to have numbers and see how markets are changing, etc. But a huge factor that you need to keep into account is you're negotiating with a human that's in front of you. So humans tend to have certain behavioral characteristics. Even when you negotiate, you would see that there is a trend behind your behavior. So one of our main focus areas when it comes to analytics is also try to simulate or estimate how your supplier would behave based on historical trends, but also based on linking it together with whatever is happening in the market. So how would I expect, based on how I've seen that my supplier has reacted in the past, how they would in the future react based on how the market is changing? That's a huge factor too. Yes, definitely.
So what's been the outcome of all of this?
Yes. I think the easiest one to get an understanding without even going into the numbers and looking at the statistics is that previously we couldn't even consider all scenarios, like I mentioned. It was too huge to put down on paper. So you had a big risk of missing certain scenarios that you might never even thought about. By using machine learning or by using statistics, it means everything is taken into account, which previously was not the case. So you are ensured that you have the actual optimum without having any doubt of it. And I think that's a big win, because going back and making sure that you take a decision, this is one of the risks that you have. The decision might sound good, but is there a better decision than this? And I think you're taking away this risk by making sure that you use machine learning. And I also want to emphasize that it's not that the numbers are taking the decisions, it's still the human that's taking decisions with their intelligence. Because of course, all the category managers have a huge amount of expertise within their own field. The data just supports them. It's intelligence that would support them take their decisions. So it's definitely not the machine telling you what to do. It's the machine helping you to get a better and holistic view of what's going on so you can take the best decision.
Okay. So, Guarav, do you have numbers around top line growth as far as turning procurement into a service that you offer other organizations? And then the savings increase that you've experienced because of it?
I think we saw process efficiencies of about between 85 to 95% of our key procurement processes. As far as the robotic process automation processes were concerned, in some of the processes, we reduced the cycle time about 95%. So that was on the process efficiency perspective, using the recommendation engine, which is basically pulling in the requirements of the demand forecasting from various opcos, analyzing what can we bundle together. I think we were able to recommend about 5+ bundles in very, very strategic deals, and there are about 100+ recommendations in pipeline, effectively meaning when you're trying to go to negotiate with a vendor on a silo deal, you can just go to the system, search for a recommendation, and then you'll be able to see, okay, I can actually negotiate 3 or 4 or 5 bundles together. And,
so kind of a run book approach to negotiating certain contracts, right?
So it's the data forcing you to actually consider the bigger picture. So let's say you can choose to operate in silo, but then the recommendation system will find out that there are 4 other people working with the same vendor, and then you will be notified that now you have to negotiate as part of the group instead of one silo approach, which eventually bundles up to the unique economics benefit. So we have about 100 plus recommendation at any given point of time in our pipeline. And then lastly, as Laila said, using the game theory, we analyze about 50 million scenarios, and which were, I guess, used in decision optimizations of sourcing size of $1 billion plus. So I guess these are some of the big numbers that we have seen and at scale.
Okay.
But numbers
and the percentages.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The percentages that you gave me earlier, just a minute ago, those were what? You said 95% efficiency or 90% efficiency. What does that mean in real terms?
So we mentioned about Jessica. Jessica has various components. One of the function is about the robotic process automation, where we do process mining to identify what process can be automated, and then we give it to the Jessica, which is our PA-powered bot. And then the Jessica was able to, let's say, automate the tactical activities, highly frequent activities of procurement. So we have picked about top 10, top 20 procurement activities, which were very high time consuming. And we saw cycle reductions of about 95% in all those tactical activities.
And what's a cycle reduction?
Cycle reduction basically means if the process used to take about 10 days, it's now reduced to about a day in the length of the completion. Yeah.
Using RPA as the backbone for
You're correct.
Savings. Okay.
And,
so now
and
that
not
doesn't...
only
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, not only the efficiency, but it's the accuracy also, which we are very happy about. I mean, from the low dips of about 50-60% data quality issues, now our data quality is pretty much everything 100% in terms of the right formats, the right numbers into the right columns, and that eventually improves your machine learning algorithm data pipeline. So that has been a huge enabler.
Do you have an example of a process? Can you kind of give me a rundown of an individual process and how it's been improved using RPA?
Yeah, I think one of the best examples, or the easiest to understand, is whenever we receive a BOQ, a bill of quantities from our suppliers, it would take a lot of time to manually check all of these prices because it's based on a unit price. What happens now is that whenever the team receives it, they just email it to the bot. The bot checks it all and sends them back let's say, results in a document, and then they can move forward from that.
How much time does that save, for example?
So of course, it depends on the BOQ, right? When you have a huge BOQ, it could take, let's say, around an hour to really go through it manually. And now it would just be, let's say, a second because you just email it. That's it.
Okay.
One thing I just want to highlight is it's not the size of one transaction, but the volume of the transaction. So the granularity of the POs or the BOQs that Laila is speaking about, it can run into 2,000, 3,000 line items for manual price validations, right? And we are talking about 100,000 POs in a year. So when you look at that scale, it eventually enables a huge automation benefit.
So it's 100,000.
And I think on top of that, Guarav, it's not only that you're saving time by checking it, it's also an extra audit that you're doing to make or to ensure that you have the correct price. So it's also kind of a price opportunity that you would previously not have because it would have been impossible to manually check all of those BOQs.
All right, that's a good example. So that's probably something most companies deal with on a regular basis. They may not do 100,000 a year, but even 1,000 is a lot. It could be 1,000 hours a year, right? Somebody's time, and that's in your case 100,000 hours. That adds up pretty quick, right? And it also frees up people for the higher value add activities, right? Which is what automation is supposed to do ultimately, right? Yes. All right. Well, Laila, thank you. Guarav, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
If you liked this episode, please tell your friends and check out our other shows. You can find Inside DT on all the major hosting platforms, including Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and Google. Talk to you soon.